No, the chatter?
Hello. No, we don't have the chatter turned on.
Oh.
It's too late now. We'll have to start. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming to another live episode of Inside the Player Studio. Today with me, our guest is art director Tim Heydelaar from
Hello, everyone.
EverQuest 2. Little known fact, can I leak?
Of course.
Was it 10 years ago?
8 years?
8 years ago?
Yeah.
He and I were in a WoW raiding guild together. Seems like 100 years now.
Were we raiding or stumbling? I'm not.
Yeah.
It was good times.
I was learning. It was good fun. Years go by. All right. So now we're here to talk about Player Studio. Some of you are EverQuest 2 artists, are creators. Some of you are Player Studio creators from other games. Some of you are just checking out the stream and enjoying a little discussion about games. I have news for several of you about the the Player Studio Viewer app that you guys have been waiting for. Just to remind folks what it is, keep in mind that when you make a game in make an object in an art tool, and then put it in the game, it does not necessarily look the same in the game engine as it did in the art tool when you were building it. And that discrepancy causes problems sometimes. So what we've done is we've built a series of viewer apps, one for each game engine actually, that will let you open your item you've built and look at it as if it were in the game to give yourself a good idea of what's going to happen to your colors and such when it gets into the game. So we've built it into our workflow process too, where we're asking you each time you make an object, please get it as far as you can, put it inside the viewer app, look at it, light it, turn it around, think about it, decide if that meets your quality bar, and then save it out in the system, export it as a .soepsx file. Then take that and go through the submission process. You'll find that it makes the item come out more true to what you'd expected, and it also will improve the quality and the time to marketplace for the items.
A bit later, I'll bring up the Player Studio app and our in-game render and actually show both side by side, so we can kind of get an idea of what the difference will be. It's not too much, but it should definitely help.
It'll help. Why are we bringing this up now? Because the first viewer app reached the market today. If you have PlanetSide 2 installed on your computer and you updated for today's patch, you now have, if you go inside the install folder for PlanetSide 2, you now have a new folder in it called Player Studio. And inside the viewer app has been installed. The EverQuest 2 version will come in a patch next Tuesday. That's Tuesday, November 25th. So if you, when you patch your EverQuest 2 client on Tuesday, please go take a look in the folder where it installs and look for the Player Studio thing. I'll be very excited. If you're playing EverQuest and the original, you have a little bit more time, sadly. The next patch is December 9th, tentatively. So when that patch comes, you'll get it as well. If you're a PlanetSide 2 player, you have one extra piece of work to do that you don't need to do for EverQuest or EverQuest 2. And that is you need to install the high-resolution texture pack. It's too big to just distribute to everybody with their game. So it's a gorgeous pack. I'm posting on the forums either later tonight or tomorrow with the address again for where to download it. It's already up there, but I'm going to post again and draw attention to it because you're going to want to unpack it into the textures folder, inside the Player Studio folder, inside the PlanetSide 2 folder. It'll be great fun. Very excited about that. And instead of giving you a top 10 list or anything like we've usually been doing, Tim has prepared something really cool over here that's going on another monitor, and it's too cool to just sit here and look at the two of us heads talking. So how about we flip the view over to your monitor and show them?
It's
You
way
ready?
more exciting than our heads.
Yes, it's what we would look like if we could. Just kidding. Here goes nothing. There.
All right.
We went on a diet and exercise.
Yes.
Neither of which sound particularly good at the moment.
So this zone right here, this is actually a test zone that I use after I've converted a Player Studio item. I'll put it in here, I'll run around it, I'll see how it's lit, how it looks, I'll test the collision, the size, everything else. And this is a zone probably from the last month or two, has a couple extra things in it. From releases you guys have submitted, a lot of the Halloween releases are in here. A lot of the recent top 10 items are in here as well. And one of the first is the Free Blood Tomb.
Yay!
Yeah. And just to give
I
a bit
love
of
this.
feedback, possibly as to why it did so well, something we tend to see is items that are functional or big, almost like mini houses like this, they do really well. I think it's because it probably saves a lot of item count. And it could also just be the time of year players really wanted something a bit more foreboding and dark, and that contributed to its success. I believe it was the top seller.
I think so.
And we have
Show them what happens when the sun sets.
So sometimes it's requested and sometimes it's not. Sometimes I'll do it just because I feel it needs it. And when we talk about the Player Studio Viewer app, you guys will be able to actually do this on your own soon and get the feedback to kind of tune this. We've talked
Very
about
cool.
adding a couple more shader types that you guys can use, and one of them is a missive glow basically. And it's not too strong here, but at night you can see the windows would kind of remain lit. And that's just because it felt like it kind of needed it. Otherwise they'd be somewhat dim like the ground is here, but you can see it's got kind of a glow. Just like on the Thexian wagon, which I believe might have been in the list, has the same treatment done on the windows there.
Nice.
And it's actually really simple to do.
Woohoo.
Yeah, I'll explain it in a bit when we're going through the Player Studio Viewer app. And some of the other...
Makes it look like there's stuff happening in it.
Some of the other, I think from the top 10.
Oh, look at
the
that.
Ferryman's Bundle.
The Ferryman's Bundle.
Those Neckos. And got some candles on it. There's a light in the center. It's a really cool ferry. I think the ferry on its own did really well. And the Fortune Teller's Ball. Now this is one of those submissions where I believe there's a glass, the creator wanted some glass, and then it asked for an effect of some sort or wanted the glass to do something. And what we did was add a bit of particle flavor to it and change the glass out to glass that our shader system supports. And this is kind of what we ended up coming up with.
Yay!
Just gives a little bit of motion,
Very
a little bit
nice.
of mystery to it. Let's see. The outhouse. Again, another reason we bring these in here. Gotta make sure you can use it. Yeah. Oh, yes. It's that time. Don't watch.
Oh, you guys.
And then the Twisted Granny's house. Again, it's functional. We do scale, and we do have to be mindful of collision. It's very, very tight, but it works. And then, of course, the rope bridge. Now, this is an item I'm surprised that we didn't release on our own sooner. There's one somewhat like it in a couple of our old zones. And Raul, I believe, created this, and it's doing really well. It's functional.
Very cool.
Yeah. And, of course, the roofs. And the gallows, which are perfectly scaled, just in case you wanted to stand there. And then
I don't think he can get his head through that guillotine.
Yeah, what we actually, it's not showing here, but we spent some time actually making it functional. When an item kind of strikes a chord with us, maybe we'll put some extra time in it, throw it through a couple people, and you can actually use this and the blade will drop and then pull back up. It's really cool.
Oh.
Yeah. And then just to kind of sound off on another reason we use a zone like this, I don't think these have been released, but they've been converted and they're not finished yet. And the reason you can see that ultimately make it in here is things can end up not scaled properly. It could be that I didn't scale it up right, or the size that it came in from your file wasn't quite there. But it always gets checked here first. The furniture is probably just a bit too small, really small, even if it's halfling. What we want to tend to do is kind of leave it a little bit larger, because items will always look better when they're scaled down, because the textile density gets tighter, and then when they're scaled up, they'll tend to hold up better. So we want to make a judgment call based on an appropriate size, usually to a human. And that's kind of it for this zone.
Very cool.
But there's a lot of items. You might have seen some other items we've got in the works that don't look familiar. Another Halloween release right here. In the crater, it asks for the skulls to float. We put some flames, and there's some sound effects in there. Touch on the cartoony side, but for Halloween, you bend the rules a little. But yeah, this is where it ends up, and we'll be running through another zone.
Very nice.
Just like this.
What happened to that poor egg?
Egg, it's a brain.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And then we put some more effects on there. There's actually zapping sounds. Yeah,
Nice.
that's really cute. It's for people to kind of roleplay a bit. But yeah,
Very cool.
absolutely. Halloween had a lot of great releases, just like it did last year.
The goat-headed lantern thing, isn't that supposed to be on the front of the boat?
It's an additive piece, and he intended it to be separate, and it can be placed there by the player, but it can also be used as a sconce. There's a little bit of swing in the lantern if you watch.
Nice.
Yeah, just some flavor. All in all, a good set of items for that event for sure. Knights of the Dead was really good this year.
Well done, guys.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have to switch to another zone?
I'll bring up the other zone once we start talking about the Player Studio app.
Should I go back to main cameras?
Sure.
All right. That allows you to do your magic on the screen while no one's watching. All right, over here. Just kidding. He'll have it done in a second.
All right. So we can go back to the Player Studio app if we want to.
Oh, that is the viewer app right there.
Absolutely.
Very nice.
Brought a couple examples.
Hang on, let me switch back over to you. Do.
All right.
This is what it looks like when you first open it up.
And again, each game has its own version of this. This has a couple of shader profiles that are tuned to our game. You'll notice 3. Right now, the creators are working with a diffuse, normal, and spec only. Just color, normal, spec. And I've talked about trying to open up alpha to you guys for a while. And one of the reasons we've kind of taken our time with it is without good feedback of how that alpha's working.
Right.
You guys might end up just kind of stumbling a bit.
Yeah.
And we also wanted to open up glow, and glow can be really powerful. I think it's going to be really well used on weapons, but as you saw in some of the house items in the zone, there's a lot of effective uses there as well. So let's bring in an item that I used to test the viewer app with our coders. The first thing you'll notice is that this does not bring in OBJs. This brings in FBXs. FBX is just another file format. It should be supported by pretty much any program I think people are using. One of the positives, it does support multiple UV sets. That's one of the main reasons we're switching support to that, and I think it's primarily because of PlanetSide. We won't take use of that yet, but possibly in the future, because I can think of a couple items that would really benefit from having an additional UV set for like grime or dripping rust, effects like that.
Blood.
Yes, not blood.
Oh, I didn't
Wine.
say that.
No blood.
That's yeah.
So the first thing is we'll bring in the model, and it comes in flat shaded, and you can't see anything yet. So the next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to set up the shader, and the nice thing about this is it's very much like the shaders you guys are creating now. I mean, you're going to see the same maps go right in. In fact, it reads the target files. So we'll add a material, and then we'll click on that material. And what that material does is it brings up the next set of options, and those options are basically you're going to plug in your TGAs, and start to see results immediately.
Nice.
In this drop-down are the 3 template styles I'm talking about now. The one everyone's working with now that we had since we launched the program is diffuse, normal, and spec. And then there's also diffuse, normal, spec, and emissive, the glow. And then lastly is diffuse, normal, and alpha.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yes, as I've posted on the forums, one of our limitations is we do not have good specular support when we're trying to use alpha. So in this case, we won't even accept a spec map. And when people have submitted alpha in the past, it's had a spec attached to it, and we just unfortunately kind of have to ignore it. But I think the submission kind of required it. So we'll start off with the template you guys are using now. And the next thing we'll do is go point it at some textures. So I believe I'm pulling up the color first.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll add the normal. And then I'll add the spec. So at that point, we've got our maps assigned, but it's not yet assigned to the model. So we'll simply come up to the model, which is up here, which we loaded first. And then it says materials unassigned. We're going to come down here where it says unassigned, and we'll choose that material. And there you go. Simple as that. Now you're seeing a decent representation of what it'll look like in the client. Now, this is a different engine than our engine, so there are different lighting effects going on. There's some anti-aliasing on by default, but we tried to get it very close so you guys can make an accurate judgment call on what the asset will look like once it gets into our game. And some of the things you can do in here are actually really nice. And this is great for checking out your emissives and your glows throughout the time of days. You can come over to the rendering tab, and there's time of day, and you can just change the time of day. See the light kind of pan around, which is good for checking your normals, and just your geometry, because the lighting will affect both. You can turn on shadows if you want. I recommend not, just so you don't confuse any contrast lines or cast shadows as issues with the map. But we'll keep it somewhere right there. And so we've got that, and say we want to come back, and now we want to add a glow. And I actually use this model, Lucky Cat from Neko, just to test some glow. And we'll come back in, we'll simply just change our shader type to include the emissive. Down here it comes in blank to start. And then we'll go point it to a glow map. And you don't see too much yet, but just focus on the eyes and the bell. And there you go. Now you can see at night what's glowing. And I'll explain that map in a minute. But it's a very simple map. It matches the dimensions of your color map, and you basically, with a subtle color, the glow must have color, it's not a black-white map, define areas you want to glow. Black being no glow, and anything beyond that will glow. I'm talking if it's even super, super dark gray, it's going to glow, basically brighten the entire model. So you can see that. And I think you guys will have some fun with this. So like that Free Blood Tomb and the Thexine Wagon,
Yep.
the things with windows. You guys might want to consider stained glass can now have just a subtle illumination on its own, which will really kind of make it nice inside homes. It'll always feel like there's some light coming through. So we've got that. And while I've got that up, let's see if I can give you a compare and contrast against one of our internal tools. All right.
Nice.
Come on, Lucky Cat. All right. And there you go. So again, the app is on, that's on our left. And this is our internal tool on the right. You can see there's not much of a difference. Again, just some aliasing, some other things, but this is what we wanted to kind of tune our version of the Player Studio app to show. Make sure that there wasn't a huge difference between the two so that you guys, again, could make an accurate call on the quality of your asset. And glow and everything else we'll be able to see pretty much as you guys set it up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
And one of the best things about this, because I know you guys have been wanting to use this, some of you guys might have been a little skittish trying to learn to use it, but I highly recommend getting comfortable using alphas. A few submitters are submitting and they call out when they're using alpha, and I see it in the alpha channel, and I'll set up the shader accordingly. But alpha is really powerful for saving poly cost. A lot of people are trying to model in a lot of curvature that could very well just be done in texture and look better. So let's go get another. So this is currently flat, and we'll set it to alpha test. And we'll go get its color. And its normal. And we'll assign it. And there you go. So now you can also see alpha within the viewer app. This is probably one of the strongest points for creators, I think, is being able to actually tune their alpha. And again, just to kind of give you guys some context. Let's see if I can quickly pull this up again. Yeah, and I'll actually explain some things about alpha. I know on the forums I've explained kind of how our alpha works, and how you guys want to paint it to get the best results possible, given how our engine works. Again, another zone, a bunch of other objects. But one of the things you'll see is that same cage here. Now, if I can take a moment, I'll actually kind of explain one of the things you're seeing here. If you guys find my post on the forums, it should be sticky. If it's not, I'll make sure it is. But I talk about how the alpha is calculated. For those that understand alpha, it basically takes an 8-bit alpha and crunches it to a 1-bit. 1-bit simply means on or off. You can see this is either there or it isn't, and it uses the 8-bit alpha to kind of give an average. And in this case, it's really chunky. The reason it's chunky is because the space left for the alpha on the texture was very, very small. And one of the things we touched on was making sure that if you plan to use alpha, give it more space than you'd think it would need on the map against like an equivalent area of wood or something else. You want enough pixels to be able to you almost want to make it larger than it needs to be and then shrink it down. And this has there's two reasons for this. One is when players are running with a different texture resolution. It'll start. Oh, actually, I don't think I have it cooked here. Yeah, it'll actually start to change the map side, and these holes will get bigger. So I believe I recommended try and have it like 4 to 8 pixels wide at the thinnest, and in this case I believe it's generally like 3, so it's right at the threshold of not being able to hold up. And we can do a couple things to kind of make it stay around and not kind of cut out, but again, one of the things we focused on for this tool was being able to give you guys the ability to fix these holes and these other things that are in here without us asking for revisions requested. Being able to see it here real time helps a lot. In fact, as you guys are working in whatever program it is you guys use to texture with, if you update your TGA and the Player Studio Viewer app is calling that TGA directly from that location and you save it, it'll update real time. So you can make some edits, hit save, come back to the app, and it will update. So you can kind of make really fine tweaks and kind of see if you're going in the right direction, undo. Yeah, it's really nice. It's really good for just kind of rapidly fixing things. But this is probably one of the best things about the app, is definitely being able to see alphas. And we want to get this obviously to you guys soon so you can start taking advantage of this, but I highly recommend finding our posts, learning about how to use alphas, because I think if we're going to critique a few things today, I'll explain what would probably be done better in alpha. But yeah, hope you guys like it. I think it's going to come in handy for sure. But yeah, there's that guy. And just a few of the other items. I guess while we're in here, we'll look at some of the ones.
Oh, sure.
I don't even know. I'm not sure if all of these have been released. There's the Tinkerfest. I believe it actually got a small bit of music added to it, just as some flavor. These, I don't think they've gone out. I'm sure Raw will let me know if they have or haven't. I think this will be popular. It's kind of teetering on the building block, but I also know that players would use this many blocks to build it, so it's going to be probably a welcome addition to creators. One of the things I also want to point out, notice how there is no collision on the rail on something like this. The reason I did this intentionally was if I want to keep something at a scale that makes sense, sometimes the collision of the character won't allow you to go through, and it'd be a really tight fit and just not fun. And conversely, you wouldn't be able to use it scaled down if you wanted to create a small house, I don't know, a dog's house or something with a ramp for your plushies. You wouldn't be able to do that, and so I will sometimes just make the call and make sure that the collision is functional. I'm not interested in realism in that sense. I want it to be something you guys enjoy. You can swing your camera around and it's not grabbing the camera. And just a couple other items. Oh, yes, actually, here's a great example of alpha usage.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure if this is in the marketplace either, but this is a really well done vanity. And unfortunately, again, you can see it doesn't have spec, which would be really good for something that's metallic. Hoping we can work on that sometime this year. But this done polygonally would not, you wouldn't be able to submit it. It would be rejected for the poly count alone. But when it's done in alpha, you can actually put a very nice design however you want, as long as, again, you give it enough space and you get all that flavor, that filigree, that curve to really kind of sell the item. You can see it's on the footing as well. And the map space does use good. You can see that there's just a portion of the map and then it's flipped. It's actually just a small portion. It's flipped probably 8 times. Just get creative, just like you're doing with your textures the same way. Here's another example where this whole inlay is done. And it turned out really nice as a result. It allows you to put the poly usage where it matters in the rest of the item and allow this to come through
Very
much
nice.
more as art instead of just crunching polys on curves that are going to end looking kind of notchy anyway. And I think just a couple of the other items that are probably out there. Yep, hey, there's the lucky cat. So we can bring. He's not glowing, I don't think. And the birds. But yeah, seriously guys, I want you guys to really get comfortable using alpha. I think there's a host of items that either you guys couldn't do or now can do with this.
Now, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I noticed that the mirror part is not really a mirror.
Yes.
Is that the best we can do?
If I change this to R shader, I would just have to cut all this out and replace it with a reflective shader. It is not the best we can do. Sometimes it comes down to someone requesting. Sometimes it's, will it work right? It has to be perfectly planar, which in this case it is. So we could probably put a mirror on there. And I don't think this has been released yet. I'm not sure. But even if it has, we could update it. But again, mirrors are funny. Like the second you try and set up an infinity mirror, I'm sure some of our players have seen some really interesting things happen. But no, we can definitely jazz something like that up.
So your advice to a player if they want to design something that's going to take a mirror is to, I actually can't really point at it, is to yeah, exactly.
Just note it in the submission text.
And to make it as smooth as possible and without as many intrusions?
In this case, unfortunately, it would have to be one of our shaders mapped to a polygonal area, so they would actually have to cut out this geometry as best they could. Now, this is painted pretty well, and so it could, it would increase the cost a bit, but again, since alpha was used here and not trying to model all these curves, there's probably plenty of budget left to do that.
Nice.
And then simply in the submission text mention, hey, the background, the backing of the mirror, can you guys use a mirror shader? And we'd be happy to oblige. And most people ask us for glass or water or mirrors or something.
Yeah.
We tend to listen.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
We want the item to kind of turn out as expected. And again, flowers is another great use of alpha. Instead of trying to model a bunch of leaves or petals and other things, get comfortable with alpha. There's a lot you can do. Yeah.
Nice.
And that's that for alpha. And again,
oops.
Yeah, you can see that the second I turn off, I jump from our alpha template back to a normal one, it will shut off the alpha. It'll show you just kind of what the map looks like with the white background that's in there. So that's how you kind of know you're making sure you do it right. And then tune it accordingly. And then again, the nice thing is it will remove the channels that you cannot use down here.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't wait for you guys to have this. The coders have put in a lot of work, and so I hope it's well received.
Very nice.
All right.
Shifting back to the camera for a moment while you get set up. Do you have any submissions to critique with us today?
I was just going to go to our pending and just kind of riff on a couple of them.
Nice.
Let's see if I can pull this up. Was I smart and actually bookmark this? Yeah, it wasn't smart enough to save some typing.
You'll fix it. No worries. Shall I go ahead and shift over?
Sure.
All right,
So I don't see
here
we've
we go.
got chat, so I don't know if anyone's specifically requesting anything, but I'll just kind of riff on a couple of them. Let's see where we stand.
This is the view we see, guys. This is what we look at every day.
These are the current pending submissions. These are beyond valid, so it means initial impression was favorable, and we're going to look at it a bit more closely.
Right. And you can see why one reason why screenshots matter here, because we look at it as a way of sorting between lots of submissions.
Yeah, it helps us. Something we've mentioned in the past is, this is your opportunity to stop and grab us and say, hey, this will go through great. It's a really good item. From your screenshot, we can see multiple views. We really get a feel before we have to take it into Maya and do any sort of partial conversion to find out the problems. This
Right.
is your
Chance to sell it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we'll actually just start with this because I think it was recently submitted, and I believe this is from Raw.
Oh, cool.
So it's a stable, and since we just talked about alpha, this is one of those cases where, we could take something like this on the side and make some really nice kind of curved wrought iron instead, to just kind of soften this up a little less cell-like and a bit more, not fancy, but flavorful with use of alpha. And it looks, at least judging by the portions I'm seeing, there's probably space on the map, or some things could be shuffled around to include that. It's not bad on its own, but I think it could benefit greatly from just using alpha in a situation like this. In terms of what I would change, well, I see there's a long block of wood right here, and in an item like this where you've got wrought iron hitting wood and you assume it's going to be set on the ground, what would be nice is kind of lower this contrast between materials. Maybe the iron has bled out a little bit onto this wood. Maybe it's a little bit roughed up on the bottom from having sat in a stable for a while. Nails bleed around here. Just something that kind of says this isn't a panel of wood that wasn't affected by the material, but rather these two have aged together. And I believe I saw some mention inquiring whether or not this could be turned into a door that functions somewhat like the doors we set up for the outhouse, and some of the other submissions. I see no reason we couldn't, though I would recommend, instead of 2 doors, fusing this into one and just having it be a long swing gate instead. But I think a stable's a great idea. I'm sure there's plenty of people who'd want something like that. And like I believe I also mentioned, I saw you mention, I am glad to see that you actually put some sort of detail onto
looks
the
good.
Let's see if I can zoom in a little closer, onto the metallic surfaces instead of just a flat metal. Even that, it's hard to see here, but even that super soft, just kind of hewn edge looks a little bit rusted on the edges of each of them. It matters. It makes it feel less like it's just a material wrapping a surface and more like that bar was created and it's starting to weather on the ends. Those little details help a lot, and it's one of the things I think we focus on a lot when we ask for revisions. So let's go back and see what else. Quickly, this set from Neko. This is a huge set.
Huge, I tell you.
Yeah. And again, it's another one of those things that's teetering on building block, but my stance on building blocks has kind of changed. What I will not accept is basically cubes and cylinders and things like that. But these items here have a lot of flavor within themselves and could stand on their own and be used in other ways. The rooftops are probably the first kind of test bed for that, and they've done really well. Players definitely like them, and I don't want to, not release things that players are going to buy. That's the goal of this program. So something like this I think would be great. I looked at the map a bit and contacted the creator just for a couple possible issues, but overall I think it's really cool. I'm interested to see how players will use something of this scale, and will they try and replicate what's here or go off on their own tangent. The one thing I think will probably be quite popular is actually the wall sections versus the fully built ones, because with these, players can give themselves their own interior. They can use a combination of these and the roofs to create basically mini homes wherever they want, whereas these are a solid block. It's not quite as useful as these. But yeah, we'll be keeping our eye on that for sure. It's a lot of items. You can see there's a lot there, but It looks like it was set up well. I believe it's only 2 textures for the entire set. Again, very smart usage of texture space.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else we got here. Another roof. I believe this has gone through revision. Still want to take it into client to kind of see if the normals are popping better than they were before. But I like the theme. We definitely have some prestige homes that lend itself to something like this.
Yep.
And with the recent release of some of the other, like the Foo Dog and the Archway,
Treasures of the East.
yeah, I think this would complement that nicely.
Yeah.
Here's a cute one. So this is one of our more silent creators. I believe this is NS6, and this person creates a lot of interesting items. The tinkered chessboard, that kind of gramophone we saw earlier. There's even a Roquilic kind of nutcracker, and just some interesting one. I think the eagle-headed staircase as well. And I thought this was really cute. I haven't looked at any of these beyond what I'm seeing in the screenshot, so everything I'm talking about is judged from the screenshot. And I think something like this would be awesome again for Tinkerfest. And when I see something like this, I want to put some additional effort into it, assuming everything else pans out. Make the wheel rotate, get the small ones rotating as well, since it looks like they help spin it. Just again, some flavor. Thematically, it's a bit weird to see kind of like an armored mouse. It's not quite in the shape of Ratonga, but doesn't matter. I think someone would like to have this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see what else is in here. A lot of paintings have come in lately. I think Rawls a submitter of most, and all I really request in the painting is to make sure that the painting feels EQ2-ish. Our own paintings, there's a rather wide swatch of what they look like. So I'm pretty lenient, but mostly I'll be staying away from stuff that looks like an obvious screenshot conversion, or overly 3D and kind of CG-esque, or something that's possibly too cartoony. Otherwise, players definitely love paintings. It's something that we see in almost every home, and we're still finding some paintings of our own that have been unreleased that we release, and players adore them. Let's see, more paintings. Here's another building block set-ish, and the creator was adamant to not really call it a building block, and is interested to see if it'd be accepted. So this is probably right on the edge of what I would accept, and there was a lot of effort put into this to definitely not make it feel like it's just a cube. And that's probably why it's sitting in pending right now. And I think these would be very popular. There's definitely some effort in the texturing. It looks a bit flappy. Definitely like to see the stones pop more. I think less trying to just filter the color map to get a normal for some of these areas would get those stones to have a bit more relief. But overall, it's solid, and just given the roofs that have done really well, I think something like this and the other pieces that complement it would definitely sell. One of the things we notice as well is it doesn't have to be overly intricate or overly perfect. We are looking for items that mesh well with the existing game environment, and since these items exist in a home, we're a bit more lenient on what goes in. So we also want to make sure that it's good for players' homes, and obviously focus on the sales, how well they'll do. You see, I tend to try and give my opinion on that a lot, because ultimately that's where the success of our creators will come from, and you guys will keep creating. Everyone wants a return whether or not they say they do. Let's see, just a couple other cute items, maybe for Moonlight Enchantments. It's looking a little bit toyish here just because of how it was rendered, but I'll probably take this guy partly through getting converted and just check the size to make sure it holds up. But it's cute, and it goes right along with the other items that we've released for an event like that. A lot of these items, this type of just what placeable fireplace. I think we've released one ourselves, and then this creator has one. I believe it's already in the marketplace, and here's another very traditional. Spent some extra time trying to kind of make the firebox look a bit worn. I know I asked for him to remap it a couple times. It's still a little kind of firehouse brick red, not a lot of age to it. But the layout and function of the shelves and just changing the pattern on the back and adding some of the trim helps a lot. On the back side, I'm not as particular because I understand that could eat up a lot of texture space if we tried to deal with that effectively. I'm really concerned with the front and maybe the sides in terms of quality. But this is the type of item where once we convert to FBX and possibly we decide to allow additional maps, something like an additional map that it maybe is mapped from top to bottom that just adds a bit of wear, or it's somewhat like these spots you can kind of see, but you have control independent of how this one is mapped to use it to kind of fake an AO or some wear across the surface without having to add it to your default color map. Let's see. Any strike your fancy here you want to hear about? There's a good chunk. I think we got the carpet to complement the fire carpet. Another rooftop. This one's been sitting here for a while. I apologize to the creator, but I'm still not quite sure if it has a place in the game. Like, it's more of an issue of, is it compelling? And it might find a couple people who really want something quite like this. It started off different and it's kind of evolved into this, but it's just, it doesn't have a clear definition of what it is intended to be or what it possibly could do. Obviously, if we did take this through, I'd rotate it and maybe put some flame jets out of it, but the onus should not fall onto us to kind of sell it. It has to be sold before we make it, so to speak, better. We're just adding finishing touches, and even that's not a guarantee because it comes down to definitely time and resources. A lot of paintings. The lighthouse. This is a huge one. So I think this would be popular. I understand the mapping on this guy is basically impossible to do properly with the size of the maps that we allow. Again, this is a case where having a second UV set would probably pull this guy into the realm of looking just a lot more proper, but as it is, it's very clean, and I understand that some age or some wear was kind of added to it just to kind of knock out that really polished surface. You'd see it repeating, and it'd probably be just as bad to see a bunch of spots repeating across it. So keeping it kind of flat was definitely the right choice given the limitations. It's just a lot of noise and lines and just an odd perfection to it, despite the fact that I think players would probably like it. So it's sitting a bit until maybe it's one of those I might map a second set to it just to kind of help it out a bit, because there was 1 or 2 revisions of this. There was a lot of effort put into it, and sometimes we want to kick back to our creators and help them out too. Yeah, just a lot of items. Some have been here for a bit. Even if some of the items are sitting in our queue for a while, do realize that we have a lot that are still kind of waiting to go out. And the release schedule, we tend to push a good chunk of them out at a time, and we want players to be aware of that set of items, purchase those, enjoy those before we go creating noise by having very, very frequent releases. I know everyone's kind of got a different opinion on if that's correct or if it's not, but historically we've kind of seen let people, absorb only so much. It's the shelf space mentality, and you only want to kind of have so much out there at once that people can kind of shop from, and the Player Studio marketplace right now is got a very, very healthy amount of stuff up there.
What about going over to the ones that got rejected and showing some of those?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, you cue that up and I'll switch the camera back over.
Let's see if we can find some.
It's a big folder.
Yeah. Well, they all. Sometimes there's reasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes, I mean, some of them is very clear cut. If you want to switch back.
Yeah. Why don't you show them that one?
So. Let's come on.
It's thinking.
Yeah. Come on, it's just an image.
But it's one of many.
This will be a fine time for the site to go down. Let's see if we can do it this way until it wants to load. So effectively, this is a fence with just flat colors on the the posts, and um, this doesn't fit our game. There wasn't a lot of two-form kind of mapping. If you looked at how the texture was laid out, each one was just a block of pretty much solid color. There wasn't a lot of visual interest. Now I can see something a bit more worn that's probably in a singular color, possibly, but even the proportions are still kind of on the more whimsical, cartoony side. Really jagged sawtoothing, up and down, up and down. Um, and it's a bit simple. There's a good chunk of fences in game. I think we actually tried our hand at some kind of more festive ones last Frostfell, and they didn't do quite as I expected. But that could be because they're very, very specific. Imagine yourself as a creator. How many uses does this truly have? And is it worth going through the whole process to put it in to find out that, unless someone's creating kind of a Toyland or something like that, that this doesn't have the appeal the creator may have thought it should. It's unfortunate, but those are the decisions we tend to make. We definitely want to focus on appeal and what will perform well and what's missing from the game. And from the data we've got, we can definitely see that's a good call to make. That one went through a couple revisions. Yeah, some of these just went. Here's actually a good one. So this is weird. It must have been declined in the revision requested.
Yeah.
So we actually have the updated version of this in pending, and the reason this was initially declined was function. Wasn't so much what it looked like. Again, it's a bit cartoony, but the eagle-headed staircase actually did really well. So the creator decided to follow up with more of a night-themed set. Problem is, it wouldn't function at the scale we would have to scale it up to, so that a player could walk between the head and the banister. Right. And most of the reason it was declined was for that reason alone. And we made some suggestions about possibly moving this to the end of the banister, which the creator did, and is currently sitting in pending as a result.
Yeah.
Some weapons, I won't comment on those. This, we don't want to accept really small items. They're a drain on item count, and something like this is poly excessive, and again, it's just flat colors with a bit of noise in it. Think definitely larger. Plated items are probably the smallest we'll go, and we're pretty particular on those. And certainly if something this small, with just, you can see that it's spherical, which definitely impacts poly budget pretty quick. It would basically drop out of the engine immediately. And same could be said for this type of ornament. I think a couple revisions on. And here's kind of a case where you can tell there was some sort of photo reference for both parts. An old-time photograph with a mouse head's kind of spliced on top of it. That's kind of an immediate decline. Even if we thought that the creator possibly owned both of these, it's not something we really want to chance. We really want to stick to our guns to make sure that we're not even risking using anything that could be copyrighted, whether someone wants to try and claim it's not. And plus, the frame is just a bit, it's just lacking a bit in refinement, but mostly it's the center. Yeah. Let's see. A couple of those. And just because they're in this list doesn't, well, actually I think this is a decline list, but some of them could be resubmits, or they move forward like this was in there and we declined them and it was handled a different way and we have yet to look at it. Sometimes some of these items do go through a couple revisions and in the end just aren't hitting the mark. I believe I asked the creator for a couple goes at this one, but in the end it's just a very simple kind of photo-sourced marble butted right up against a gold that isn't mapped particularly well. And then this insignia on the end is again that kind of material. There's nothing painted to these shapes that kind of give it that kind of crafted look of the time. It's just a bit all over again with the seams and large swatches of solid color. So after I think 2 or 3 attempts, it just kind of wasn't going in the direction. At that point, we decided to move on. And the creator is free to, keep working on it, maybe try a different approach and resubmit it. But we have to definitely move on. Oh, hey, this is actually
Okay, look at the earlier version.
Yeah, so here's the earlier ones. And this, it's a bit hard to see from here, but one of the first things I asked for was to basically add a bit more triangle count to it. The size was fine overall. I was really glad to see that there was an opening in it, but what I wanted the creator to concentrate on was that kind of simplistic, kind of cubic look to it. They're well below the poly count, and generally on items of this size, I want the creators to use as much as that budget as possible. This is a perfect chance to. So I asked them to kind of up-res this and put some more detail into the footing. You saw in the final product the walls have been curved a bit, and these windows actually protrude instead of just being flat. And I think it helped a lot, and it's doing really well. And I was glad the creator accepted the advice and revised it enough times before the launch to go out. But yeah, I mean, here's just kind of another quick one. We do have a sticky post where we more or less say don't use clip art, or stay away from stuff from the internet. And this is one of those cases where it's clear to us that if this artist could draw a silhouette like this, the backside wouldn't have been near flat, and this wouldn't have been quite so plain. So at that point, we do need to make the assumption that this is probably not their own artwork, and immediately decline. It's not something we want to try and investigate. We'd rather focus on the items that are ready to go through our quality, and the creators definitely spent the time up front and is trying to sell it to us and say, hey, look, this is great, just make it go. But that's a small set of some of those guys in there. We have a huge set of accepted. Like, we have hundreds.
Don't click on that. It'll take too much time.
But yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Next time we have to get the chat loaded up so we don't have this problem that we can't tell.
I'm sure everyone said awesome things the whole time.
Maybe a couple. Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing I actually shaved this time, because it probably would have been how grizzly I looked
I know.
a couple days ago.
I know how you usually look.
Wait a minute.
So if you're just joining us in the middle, we're looking at EverQuest 2 items created by players, submitted to the Player Studio program. And these items, you will find them in the marketplace with the little gold anvil that you see up here on the screen. I can't point to anything. The little gold anvil that shows that player made it. A couple of announcements that we went over right at the beginning, but you might have missed it. The new much-awaited Player Studio viewer apps. The PlanetSide 2 version came today, in today's patch. If you patched your PlanetSide 2 client today, you now have a new folder inside your installation folder that's called Player Studio, and it's in there. If you have EverQuest 2, you will get the patch on Tuesday. If you have EverQuest, you will get the patch on December 9th, tentatively. That's the next big patch that we can put it in there and do the whole thing and correctly test it. Couple more housekeeping items, because we're getting here close to the end. Next Thursday, we do not have an Inside the Player Studio live edition because of Thanksgiving. We're going to take the week off, come back the Thursday after, and the next show will be we'll have Bill Yates from PlanetSide 2. Also, next week's Landmark Live show, normally held on Wednesdays, that will be canceled also for Thanksgiving. Some of our folks are traveling a little bit for the holiday. We're going to take that one off too. So that's our housekeeping for today. Thanks for joining me, Tim.
Yeah, and
this is great fun.
To everyone watching, definitely go to the forums. I don't know how many new people are tuning in and seeing kind of if they have the chops to create something for EQ2, But go to the forums, see what people have submitted. Look
Yeah.
at. We did open access to the submission,
Yeah.
right? So you can see what's players have submitted into the system. Whether or not it's made it, you won't know there, but you can kind of see. Well, it's fair to say it's your competition. Can you do better? Is there something that's missing? If you haven't installed the game, you can download the game free and actually open up the marketplace. Look at the items. I'm sure some people actually host galleries, or you can look online to see kind of the collections of the Player Studio items and really get a feel for kind of what's out there.
Yep.
There's always room for everyone to improve. You're never going to stop learning, but you're not going to know till you submit something.
Right.
And definitely talk to your peers. That forum is a place for you. If something's declined, go to the forum, put your artwork up for critique, and say, why do you think this was declined? I guarantee you, even some of our seasoned creators who've got some things in first shot or fourth shot have some feedback as to possibly
Yep.
why.
And the first time you walk around in game with something you made is a really, really cool feeling.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
and,
everyone.
Come join us in 2 weeks.